Good morning.
Good morning.
You can begin to understand in part the difficulty of my conveying to you what is in my mind, and the difficulty that you have in perceiving or comprehending exactly what is in mine, because you have already, some of you, begun to experience difficulties with your friends and your families. In this way, to some extent, you are not the person you were when you first came to a metaphysical study. In some ways, you have differed, while they have remained the same. In other words, you may have had the experience, such as I had, in my home where I lived with my father and sister. It was our custom to have a cocktail before dinner at night, and before retiring to have a rubber of bridge. And then after this experience took place with me in late 1928, I found that I had no taste for the cocktail, and I had no taste for the rubber of bridge. Now, I had no sense of condemnation for them or criticism, but I just personally didn't enjoy them. And so it was that when we came to table, I couldn't take that cocktail, and when it came to retiring, I couldn't play that game of that rubber of bridge. And of course I ran into conflict with my family and eventually had to move because I was a very unreasonable person. I wasn't considering others' comforts or others' welfare, but I couldn't. I had gone into a different state of consciousness. They couldn't follow me in there. They couldn't leave the place where they were, but neither could I go back to where I had been. And that is just a mild example of what happened in my experience. Going further, whereas I had enjoyed the theater 2 or 3 nights a week, now I didn't enjoy it once in 2 or 3 years. And that was strange and cost me a lot of friends. All of this was brought about not by any other change than a change of consciousness. I was now in a state of consciousness where I still enjoyed, but not the same things. I still lived, but not in the same atmosphere. Now I know that to some of you the same thing has happened, so that in a measure you are not understood to some members of your family, to some of your friends. Perhaps you have outgrown the desire for regular periods of golf or bridge or cocktail parties or theaters, and they haven't. And in that degree, there is no longer a bridge over between them and you. You do not see eye to eye. And very frankly, as time goes on, this breach will widen until you find that some members of your family have become totally separated from you, and most of your friends will have gone their way, and you either will have no friends or you will have made new friends on your spiritual path. Now, when you are in a spiritual consciousness, you no longer can see eye to eye with those in material consciousness, and they can't understand you and you can't understand them. For instance, at the first sign of a sniffle, some member of your family says, "Oh, have you taken aspirin, or have you gotten the Vicks, or have you done this?" And you start to shake up and say, "Well, now what power would they have?" You don't stop to think that just a few weeks or months ago they would have been the all-power and the first thing you would have thought of. Now you think to yourself, "Why, no, those things are effects. How can one effect touch another effect? I have access to the source." You can imagine how ridiculous that sounds to those who still believe that God is all wrapped up in an aspirin tablet. In the same way, many, many, many of the things of this world that formerly troubled you no longer bother you. Many of the things which you feared, you no longer fear. Many of the things which you enjoyed, you no longer enjoy. Well, now, that is the experience that I have sometimes, and more especially now, in conveying to you what is in my mind, because I am asking that you make still another transition. So I'm going to backtrack for a minute. In your metaphysical experience, you had problems. We did. You and I, we're all in the same boat. And we came to this metaphysical teaching of one school or another with this problem, and we learned a very strange thing, that we had to deny that we had it. In other words, here we are, very, very sick and in pain, and we're told, "Oh, but you must deny that. You haven't got it." Seemed kind of ridiculous at first, but after a while we came to understand what our friends meant. What they meant was that the sin or disease or false desire or inharmony or discord wasn't a reality insofar as God was concerned. That is, that God hadn't created it, therefore it had no permanent life or being, and in that sense was unreal. They really didn't mean that it was unreal as far as your or my experience of the moment was concerned, although it certainly sounded that way. And even when we went around affirming and denying, it must have seemed to us sometime kind of ridiculous to say this isn't true and I haven't got it, and it isn't real, and all the time it was really pestering us. But if we did finally realize what our metaphysical friends were telling us, that this condition, whatever its name or nature, had no existence in or of God. It was not a reality that had a law to sustain it. For instance, there is a law that sustains 2 and 2 is 4. Nobody can break that. But if you come under the belief that 2 times 2 is 5, regardless of how much you believe it, we can still tell you it isn't real, and 2 times 5 has no law to sustain it, and you cannot be made to suffer from it. Oh, but you are suffering from it. You're giving out 5 for every 4. Yes, temporarily, until you awaken and realize that 5 is really not a truth in relation to 2 times 2. It's a belief which you mathematically must learn to overcome. So it is in our metaphysical work. You will learn that regardless of the nature of your problem, it exists so far as you're concerned and you're suffering from it, but it exists only because you have accepted the world conviction on that point and are accepting it much in the same way that our ancients accepted the fact that you mustn't go more than 8 miles from shore, certainly not much more than that, because you tumble off into space out there at the horizon. And so you accepted that, and you suffered from the limitation of travel. You had to stay close to shore, whereas there was really no such law. And you could have gone as far as you wanted to travel, certainly as far as you could build a boat to carry you. But it took until 1492 for that to be demonstrated to the satisfaction of the world. Then what became of the limitation that held us to shore? It disappeared. It was no longer accepted, it was no longer in our mind, and therefore it was no longer manifested. So it is, those who have come to metaphysical teachings within a few years have lost 80 to 90% of their ills and problems, because the ills and the problems, which are so very real to human sense, by virtue of having been accepted as reality by them, are now found to be non-reality, having no law to sustain them, and no cause and no foundation. And so we learn how to eliminate them from our experience. But now here's what happens. We become ill, and immediately we say, no, I can't be ill. This isn't a reality. This has no law to sustain it. This has no cause in God. And whatever its physical or mental cause has no divine source, and therefore must be made instantly to disappear. And we learn very quickly how well that operates, and our sickness disappears and health appears. And so we live for many, many years, not any longer in a physical sense of life, but more in a mental sense of life, and one in which we can make the inharmonies and discords disappear and harmonies appear. During this period, we develop a very strange complex. We get to the point where we say, I'm not trying to change sickness into health or lack into abundance. I am trying to realize spiritual reality. Now, we all come to that place, but as a matter of fact, none of us mean it. Not one. We are merely using words like that in order to overcome the discord and get well, and then feel very happy that we've overcome this thing, and boast about how sick we were and how well we are now. But while it was lasting, we were saying, I'm not doing it to get well, I'm doing it to realize my Christhood. It's a point of self-deception, and strangely enough, for a while it works. We really convince ourselves that we don't want to get well. We don't want to meet Saturday's rent. Or we don't want better business. No. We just want to realize our spiritual sense. But if that fever doesn't go down or the lump doesn't disappear, how worried we get. And when the fever does go or the rent is met, how quick we are to express gratitude. Well, in Vancouver, we had a lesson like this with our students who are very serious infinite way students, and the subject of our lesson that particular night was gratitude. And I said, you are not going to make much progress from this point on unless you perceive the nature of gratitude. And it has to be a far different idea of gratitude than you have now. Because now you have grown to the place where you do appreciate metaphysical and spiritual healing, where you do appreciate the value of this type of work in life, and when you have some benefit from it, you are very, very grateful, not only in your expression of it, but in your financial demonstration of it. In other words, you are at that point where you now pay very, very liberally for every harmonious experience you enjoy through metaphysical or spiritual truth. But now I have to take you another step in gratitude, where you no longer do that, and more especially for any such reason. Because now we are going to give up gratitude for healings. We're going to give up gratitude for increased supply. We're going to give up gratitude for any form of good that comes into our experience. Now we're going to really find out why we should be grateful, what we should be grateful for, and then inwardly we will learn how to be grateful. Because now I must bring to your attention that in a spiritual teaching that goes beyond metaphysics, you are coming to that place where you must have more spiritual integrity, and when you say, I'm not trying to get well, you have to mean it. When you say, I'm not looking for increased supply, you have to mean it. Where, at this point of your unfoldment, you have to say, sick or well, rich or poor, what I'm seeking is a Christ experience, and I'm determined to have that if I have to have it with patches on my clothes, or with a half-empty stomach, or if I have to have it in pain or in health. I am determined that the object of my life is spiritual awareness. If I get well in the process, good. If I don't, it still won't matter, because I have but one object, not merely getting well, not merely having an abundance of supply, not merely being able to keep up with the Joneses, but actually now I have a spiritual mission which is as important to me as it was to the disciples when the Master said, leave your nets. Stop fishing. Stop earning a living for yourself. Stop earning a living for your families. Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. That's not an easy process. It isn't one you'll come to in 1 second, unless it comes to you by a divine inner grace. But it's one to which you must accustom yourself, because eventually you have to make it. Sooner or later, the lesson will be brought home to you that just exchanging sickness for health isn't a high spiritual demonstration, or exchanging some momentary lack for some momentary abundance isn't necessarily a great spiritual demonstration. And even if you achieve them, you will not have achieved that which you are seeking. When the Master says, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, he's really telling you about a state of consciousness which at this moment you know nothing of. A state of consciousness which your relatives who haven't gotten this far can't perceive. But you can perceive the consciousness where you are now, and you just wonder why it is that they can't perceive it. And so it is, where you are at this moment, you can't perceive the nature of the true spiritual consciousness. You cannot imagine, most of you I mean, what it means to have arrived at a place where you do not live by bread alone, where the things out here have no significance at all except that they're used as part of our daily living, but with no concern for whether they're there or not, no concern for what amount is there. You cannot imagine what it means to arrive at a state of consciousness that has little or no concern for the digestive apparatus or the eliminative apparatus or the muscles or the brain, but has already perceived that these are really governed by every word of truth that's in your consciousness. And therefore, the whole concern is to attain that atmosphere of the spirit rather than attain the physical perfection. So, what we have been declaring in treatment or meditation, now we are actually being asked to believe. Just as the beginner in metaphysics who says, I am not sick, I am well, but doesn't believe it, eventually does come to the point where they understand what they're saying and why. So it is now. You have been reading in the Infinite Way writings and hearing in the tapes right from the beginning of this work 10 years ago that our object is not to change humanhood. The only thing is that you haven't been able to believe it. Now, at the end of 10 years, you are being asked to believe it, that the object of our work is not to change humanhood. The object of our work is not to make sick people well or poor people abundant. Our abundant in goods. Our function now is to actually come into a state of consciousness where we can truthfully say, there is only one goal, attaining that mind that was in Christ Jesus, or abiding in that spirit which raised Jesus Christ from the dead and which will quicken also your mortal bodies. You will remember that we have this passage, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And you must take that as a sort of shibboleth from now on, a password, so that regardless of what problem confronts you in your own experience or for those who come to you for help, you must instantly remember where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty, and seek to attain that. Not seek to make the particular demonstration, not seek to get rid of the specific disease or lack or sin, but learn to drop those and say, no, I must attain that Spirit of the Lord. For when I do, where it is, there liberty will be found. Now you must understand the nature of our spiritual treatments, our spiritual meditations, not our old metaphysical ones. Now you must understand this. It is 100% truth that we have no concern with the name or nature of your problem. Physical, mental, moral, financial, it's all the same. Why? Because we are not going to try to do anything to it. All we are going to do is bring to ourselves the consciousness of the Spirit of the Lord, the realization of God's presence. Because when we attain that, liberty will be found there. Freedom from all discord. For ourselves and for those who are attuned to our consciousness. Now realize this. You have no demonstration to make from this day onward except one. And that is to bring to conscious experience the realization of the presence of God, the realization of the Spirit of the Lord. That is your only demonstration. That is your only function. That is your only excuse for living, is to bring to yourself. You may sit down and with the Bible or with a book read for a few lines or a few pages, then sit down and meditate, and come quickly into that response which assures you God is on the field. And then your work for that moment is through. You go on about your business. But you will find that there will be problems in your own experience and in those who come to you, which will compel you to do that 100 times over for them before that liberty is achieved. The reason is that in your consciousness and mine and in the consciousness of those who come to us, there are obstructions. We still talk a beautiful truth, but we haven't attained the consciousness of that which we are speaking. You remember the other day I said to you, when writing or speaking to a patient, speak only from the Spirit. Your vocal words are worthless unless spoken in the Spirit. And this is what I'm trying to convey to you, that all of the truth that's written in all of the truth books that have ever been written will never heal a headache in and of themselves. But if you can sit down and attain the consciousness of one statement, you not only can heal the world, you can raise the dead if all other circumstances are propitious. Now, in the mind of your student or patient, there is really only the thought of getting well. Perhaps they've come to the place where the doctors can't do it for them and they've got to turn to God, and so in their moment of need they actually believe that they want God. But don't be fooled by it. They don't. They want a healing, but they didn't get it by the doctor, and now they're willing to take it by God. God is usually the last resource. Why? Because God is that which is unknown to the human mind. So it is that even while our patients and students are professing to us and sometimes to themselves that they are really seeking God and spiritual living, they're just all agog to get well so they can get back to their human living again and have more of it. And that sometimes acts as a barrier to their healing. Usually healings take place when a real, sincere desire comes within to find God, or to find the spiritual path, or to attain spiritual consciousness. Healings come quickly then. To some extent, we are all immersed in material sense, some more, some less. And the very degree of that material sense is the degree of the barrier that is apt to separate us from our healings. Now, there's no reason for criticism, judgment, or condemnation in that, for the simple reason that it isn't our fault. Remember, we were born into it. We not only were born into it, we were educated along that line. We all know that how Americans are go-getters and how they come from rags to riches and how they are red, white, and blue great people. And I know that we believe it too. And you see, very often for spiritual healing, we have to get to the place where we lose some of our red, white, and blueness and decide that we belong more to the household of God than we do to any separate land, race, religion, cult, climb, or creed. And when we come to that, we are entering the spiritual consciousness that is able to say there are no Jews or Greeks, there are no bond or free, we are one in Christ Jesus. And don't think that by paying lip service to that sense of freedom and equality that it actually demonstrates itself that way, because it doesn't. It only demonstrates itself in spiritual harmony when we actually, in our innermost heart and soul, come to that place of recognition that just as the life of the blade of grass is the same life of an orchid, so when we come to see that the life of the Jew and the life of the Gentile and the life of the Mohammedan and the life of the Hindu is the same as the life of the Christian, Only in that degree do we enter spiritual consciousness. In the same way, we can easily pay lip service to the fact that, oh, money isn't my supply, God is my supply. But in the next breath we're watching that bank account or that wallet, and we're watching how carefully it must be paid out and how eagerly it must be sought to come in. And at the same time, metaphysically, we're declaring money isn't my supply. Do you see what I mean? That this is a transition from the cliches of metaphysics to the actual experience of living the spiritual truth that we read. Now, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. This means that at every temptation, at every suggestion of a lack or limitation in any direction, that we have to face that lack or limitation, not ignore it, look right at it, and hold up a banner and say, no, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Every word of truth in my consciousness is my supply. And by holding up that banner to the air, we find, as the Hebrews found, when they held up that banner, they have only the arm of flesh. The enemy began fighting among themselves and destroyed each other. So it is, our problems begin fighting among themselves and destroying themselves the moment we learn to hold the proper banner up, the proper Word of God. And as we can look at these pilots who claim to have power over us, or the diseases, or the sins, or the false appetites, and say, thou couldst have no power over me unless it came from the Father within. You have only the arm of flesh. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Eventually, that is the state of consciousness that demonstrates itself within you, and you'll find that you're in this consciousness where you can enjoy the world, you can be in it, but not of it. Now, it is for this reason that the message of the infinite way is often criticized, because of the attention it gives to the nature of error. Not that it would build up in anyone a fear of error in any form, but that it would hold up the nature of error to your view so that you can look it right in the face and then say to it, aha, I've seen you. I know what you are. And I shall no longer fear you, for now I understand the meaning of God's allness. It means the absolute nothingness of you that appear as sin, disease, or death. Now you know that in our advanced work, such as The Thunder of Silence, or our practitioner's chapter, The New Horizon, and in any of the teachings that I have given to practitioners, you will find that I have brought forcibly to your attention that behind all of the discords of the world is hypnotism, a mass hypnotism. Not a hypnotism from one individual to another so much as a mass, mesmeric sense that binds us. And it is not a subject that is easily understood. I can say that to you, I know. It is not easily understood how there can exist a mesmerism that binds us when we're not even aware of it. I can explain this to you, that when you're free of that hypnotism, you can see the world as it is. And when you're not free of it, you can only see it from the hypnotized standpoint. For instance, in the hypnotized standpoint, you have a fear of your body. You have a fear of lack. That's the most natural thing in the world, because that's what the hypnosis does to one. It makes one think that you live as a body. And so you want nothing to happen to that body for fear it's happening to your life. Now, here's what happens when that hypnotism lifts. If you were to look out of this door onto that garden, you would notice those trees. And at some stage or other, I don't see any there right now, but at some stage or other there would be some of those palm fronds that would be brown, dead, about to fall off. You've all witnessed the palm fronds falling when they've reached a certain stage of their development, and you say, well, it's a dead leaf or a dead frond and dead branch, and it falls off. Now, in the hypnotized state, we would say, you see, everything dies, and so I will die. And all around you, as you see flowers dying, animals dying, people dying, you become impressed with that sense that the inevitability of death, and so will I die. And you know what that's all based on? The fact that we believe that we have a relationship like that frond. In other words, that we are a branch, or that our body is us. And you see, the minute that hypnosis is lifted, you'll find out that none of that is true. If every branch falls off there, the life of the tree is still there, and it will be there forever. For the life isn't in the tree, the life is God itself. And if you remove the whole tree, the life will still be there and will appear as another tree in its due time. So with this, once the hypnotism begins to lessen, you'll see that this isn't me, this is not me. This is my body, I am invisible. And the minute you perceive that, you'll understand that this body changes. In my younger days, doctors told us that our bodies, we get a new body about every 7 years. Now they tell us, then they told us it was every 3 years, and now they begin to tell us it's every year, that the whole bloodstream changes, that the molecules of the skin and the pores and the whole structure of our body changes once a year or once in 3 years, so that at the end of that period, none of us is left anymore. We're a whole new creation. Well, you see, literally we have died. That is, our bodies have died. But that which constitutes us has raised up a new one. As a matter of fact, it's doing it all the time. This hair grows out and is cut off, and more grows. These nails are cut off, and more grow. The skin sloughs off, more skin forms. And so it is all through our being and body. The body is continually sloughing off, dying, and it is being reborn, but you and I go on forever. We've been going on from infancy to our present stage, and with this hypnotic influence of the world removed, you're going to learn that you go on forever if the whole body were buried or cremated. It would make no difference. You will already have formed a new body long before they've moved you down to the mortuary. You will have formed a whole new body, and so your whole fear of death is overcome. You no longer are concerned what they do to this temple, because in 3 days I'll raise up a new one. And 3 days can really mean 3 seconds. Instantly we are renewed. Now, it is the same way in our human or mesmerized sense. We're concerned about our dollars, and the reason is we think that our dollars are our supply. But as soon as the mesmerism begins to break, you lose your sense of dollars, and you say, well, no, the supply is my consciousness. And just as it is forming new hair and new nails and new skin, every minute it's forming new dollars. And gradually you lose this whole sense, mesmerized sense, of thinking this is the body, this is us, and we recognize it's the body, and then we no longer care about it beyond keeping it clean and wholesome. Now, that part of our teaching is not well understood except to those students who have gone far enough to do healing work. And they quickly perceive that their patient really hasn't got a disease or a sin or a lack, that they're under this hypnosis. And there's only one thing breaks that hypnosis, and that is when we learn that there is neither good or evil in this experience. God constitutes this experience, and then losing our fear of the evil and our desire for the good, the normal, the harmonious, the spiritual takes place. Now, as you undoubtedly know, you're finding more and more in print all the time about hypnotism, and there are little clubs and groups forming here and there that have meetings, and they hypnotize each other and have a lot of fun. In the same way the children have fun with firecrackers, not knowing that they're playing with dynamite. And when it blows up in their face sometime, they're much surprised because they thought they had a toy. And when some of these people awake to what they're doing, playing around with hypnotism, they also are going to get mighty frightened. And if for the time being you do not fully grasp the importance of what this teaching says on the subject of hypnotism, and the fact that you're not suffering from a disease or a lack, but the mesmeric sense that the world inflicts on you, be patient with it until it does come. But I'm going to show you that I have never exaggerated the subject of hypnotism, and nor have I overplayed it. If anything, I have underplayed it, so as not to frighten students into the belief that it's another devil. I want them at every stage to go along gently and see that hypnotism, while it's the cause of our troubles, isn't a devil. It's something that is to be understood for its nothingness, and then it disappears. But it is a serious subject, as I'm going to show you in this newspaper article. The message you don't know you have received. It's a danger to democracy. And then the article goes on to describe a new advertising technique which is now being experimented with in the United States. By means of the radio and television, they're introducing hypnotism, so that you will be hypnotized into buying the product or hypnotized into voting for the candidate that is being presented. And they have discovered a new hypnotizing technique into the moving pictures, not radio, I meant moving pictures and television. Into the moving picture, they insert just one frame with their message, and it goes through the machine and onto the screen so fast that you never see it. But it's hit your eye and registered in your consciousness. And by doing that, at every time you see a movie, Vote for John Jones, you don't even know that you were presented with Vote for John Jones, but that which they call your subconscious has received it, and you wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to vote for John Jones. He's the only candidate. He's the only one that's been inflicted on your consciousness by that means of hypnotism. in a newspaper. That is being experimented with now in our movies and in our television. And you are having pictures presented to you, messages that you can't see, because your eye isn't that fast, but your mind is. Do you see what I'm getting at? Then after a while, when Jones proves not to be such a good candidate, you say, how could I have voted for him? And if someone says you were hypnotized into it, you just wouldn't believe it. Now, we had an experience of that kind, and before World War I, this country voted very definitely for Woodrow Wilson because he kept us out of war. But Mr. Wilson knew that we had to go to war and must go to war. And there was no way to get the people to war. They even elected him because he kept us out. And so this same technique of hypnotizing was resorted to, and a propaganda bureau was set up virtually to hypnotize the public into a desire for war. And 6 months later, people were out in the streets screaming, let's go to war. They had just voted to stay out of war. They had just elected a president who promised to keep them out of war, and now they were going crazy, hollering, let's get at the Hun, let's kill the Hun, let's go to war. And they went. They were hypnotized into it by a propaganda bureau that made moving pictures, took them all up and down the country, pictures made incidentally over in New Jersey, showing the Huns shooting down the children in the public schools in Belgium. That's how First World War was brought about. Second World War was brought about in a very similar way. Now, because we naturally are not a warlike people, and we naturally have no business in anybody's war, but it serves interest that we be there. Now then, those are particular forms of hypnotism that have been used. Now they're finding the more dangerous ones of putting these ideas into the subconscious where you don't even know that you're absorbing them. At least if you go down the road and read a dozen signs to drink this particular whiskey, and you're not a whiskey drinker, you can, you do get used to the fact of not looking at the sign and receiving its suggestions. But when it's presented to you so that you can't see it, you're quite a victim of it. We have learned in this work that that is at the basis of all our ills. From infancy, we have been hypnotized into believing in this theory of medicine, that theory of medicine, this theory of human life, that theory of human life, until we've actually gotten to believe it. There was a time in my experience when the idea of Social Security was a shocking one. Why? Norman Thomas, the socialist, had that idea, and it was disgraceful to be a socialist. It was disgraceful to have such ideas. Everybody should earn their own living, and everybody should save enough. Nobody stopped to think that on the wages, nobody could save enough to retire at any time. But everybody should retire, and everybody should save their own money. And all of a sudden, that particular hypnosis is relieved, and we do begin to perceive that we have an obligation to our fellow man, and that there should be Social Security for the benefit of those who never earn enough during their lifetimes to be able to stay out of the poorhouse in their old age. And so a social revolution takes place, and we are less hypnotized by our own affairs and ignorance of our neighbors' affairs, and we come up into the freer atmosphere which everyone attains in Christ consciousness when we take upon ourselves the responsibility for our fellow man and try to provide in one way or another for everyone in this universe. Now you will find eventually that it was nothing but a hypnotic experience that bound us to our old conservative republicanism or capitalism, by whatever name you want to call it, that made us unmindful of our fellow man's problems. And that it is only because we have come up into a higher atmosphere of spirituality that we are now enabled to say, why yes, we must make some provision for those unable to provide for themselves. In that same way, I can say to you that the human race is hypnotized into concern for the body and the money. Those are two things that have the human race hypnotized. They live in fear of this body and in fear of the dollar or its lack, and only in proportion as you recognize that hypnotism is doing that, do you become free of it, and then you say, well, who said that you're naked? Well, who said that you got to worry about this body? Why, this body is a wonderful instrument of God. Let it alone, and God will take care of it. Let it alone. Don't be afraid of it. It can't do anything to you. If a finger drops off, you'll still go on. If the whole body drops off, you'll still go on. And you'll form a new one, and a new one, and a new one, and you'll be unhypnotized. And so it is, you come to get unhypnotized on supply, and you say, why, dollars? 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 What's happening here? What is that? 1 million of them. Is that supply? No, it can't spend itself. It has no intelligence. 1 million years from now, if you left it alone, that would still be here. It wouldn't be anybody's supply. It would just be dead metal or dead money. In order for this to have life, I must have life, and I must take hold of it, and I must do something with it. So it's I that is the important thing about supply, not the dollars. And when I recognize that, you'd be surprised that the dollars come in their own way and in their own time. But it's while we're hypnotized into the belief that those dollars are something that we can even become millionaires and be afraid to spend it. It's happening in every part of the world that there are men of $100,000 wealth, $1 million wealth, in eternal fear of spending any part of it for fear of the fact that there'll be that much less left. There are others who have nothing laid up where moth and rust doth corrupt, but who are able to enjoy and spend and have that which God's grace brings to them. So you will find this universal hypnotism binds us to body, to health, to supply. Freedom from it means that we no longer have concern for it. We have respect. We have no concern for it. And then our concern isn't now getting healthy. Our concern now isn't getting supply. Our concern now is abiding at the center of our being so that we do entertain within ourselves the Spirit of the Lord. For where that Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. So I say to you, we have paid lip service in the past to the fact that we're not trying to change sickness into health. But I say now to you, accept this. Do not let your concern be for health. Do not let your concern be for supply. Do not let your concern be for home or companionship. Let your concern be that at least 3 times a day you must find occasion to sit in quietness, in calmness, in peace, until you feel that surging of the Spirit within you. That's what must be your concern. That must be your demonstration. For where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. There's freedom from hypnosis. There's freedom from sin, freedom from lonesomeness, freedom from desire, freedom from fear. Because you see, to those who have attained even a little bit of freedom from the hypnotism, life is a very joyous and beautiful and complete experience, even though our friends who say, but you never play bridge and you never play golf and you don't go to the theater very much, so I can't see how you're enjoying life. Yes, Didn't we read in the paper the other day about a man about 80 years of age who was at a dinner in Hollywood? He was sitting next to one of our movie stars. And he told her, and he was having his 80th birthday, or going to have his 80th birthday in a few days. But before that, he'd been explaining to her that he doesn't smoke and he doesn't drink and he doesn't care for theater and he never dances. And so when he said to her that I'm going to celebrate my 80th birthday in a few days, she said, "How?" And I know that many of our friends say that to us too. How do you enjoy life? Well, you'd be surprised when that hypnotism is broken. Some of you have already known it, experienced it, all of you probably in a measure. You'd be surprised how much joy and inspiration and happiness and peace there is in this world, and how much companionship there is when we're no longer slaves to its desire, to its need. So, we come now to a very strange statement. Only trials and tribulations compel us to surrender human peace and material good for spiritual awareness. In our early stages, our trials and tribulations turned us to God so that we could get rid of our negative experiences and enjoy some of the good health and good supply that we saw others have around us. But strangely enough, after we've accomplished that, we go through another period of trial and tribulation. I suppose the first might be called the first degree of our initiation. And then comes along the period of the mental life, which is the second degree, and now we're coming to the third degree initiation, which is a tough one, because always in the third degree you have to face death. You'll find that in Leave Your Nets, that when we come to the last degree of spiritual initiation, we have to face and be willing to accept death. And it is when we have done that that we find that the only death we have experienced is the death of material sense. And we have been raised into the spiritual experience of the atmosphere of God. And so it is that in our third degree, the trials and the tribulations that we have compel us to surrender the human sense of good, the human sense of peace, the peace that the world can give, the health that good bodily organs and functions can give. We surrender that for the higher perception of what life is when life is lived in God. That is where we are functioning. That is where the infinite way is transiting or making a transition from the experience of human peace, human health, human supply, to the atmosphere of spiritual living, spiritual enjoying, spiritual supply. God is spirit and soul. And God is your spirit and your soul. As a beholder, you witness the harmonies of God as they appear in your daily experience. Your mind is really the interpreter of the harmonies of God becoming humanly made manifest. Heretofore, when your mind has been hypnotized with concern for the body and concern for the pocketbook, it could not function to behold God's grace in your human experience. And therefore, through your mind, you beheld this world, sometimes good and sometimes evil, sometimes up and sometimes down. And all who are hypnotized behold it in that way. Some human forms of good today and some human forms of evil tomorrow. In the degree now that you realize that God is the soul of you and functions through your mind to bring its spiritual grace, now your mind is free of its mesmeric sense, and through the mind you now behold this universe as it is. And we're told that when we awaken, we shall see him as he is, and we will be satisfied with this likeness. Thank you.